Okay, thanks everyone again for joining. This is part two of a four-part series brought to you by the Resilient Landscape Coalition. And I want to mention that funding for this series is provided by Sonoma County Ag and Open Space and some amazing donors. And this is Defensible space zones and code requirements. Last week, we did sustainability in the defensible space and beyond areas. And next week, if you want to join us, next Monday, same time, same place, we'll be presenting Firewise design within the defensible space zone. And then the following week after that, on October 28th, we'll be presenting maintenance in the defensible space zone. Okay, each workshop will be accompanied by fire official Roberta McIntyre. Wait, I'm not a fire official. I'm a board president and CEO of Fire Safe Sonoma. I am a former fire official, so I'll take the cred regardless. Okay, and that's me. I am Roberta McIntyre, kind of the opening host tonight. Many of you may know me, some of you may not. That may be good or bad depending on your perspective. This four-part series is a collaboration between, or actually this four-part series as well as the Resilient Landscape Coalition is a collaboration between Fire Safe Sonoma, the Sonoma Ecology Center, Habitat Corridor Project, and UC Master Gardener of Sonoma County. And let me give you a rundown. I'm here representing Fire Safe Sonoma. Here with us tonight with the Habitat Corridor Project is April Owens and Jennifer Roberts. And with us, at least helping us out always with all of what we do at the RLC, representing the Sonoma Ecology Center is Ellie Inslee and Rochelle Bean. And our key individuals that are our collaborators through the UC Master Gardener Program of Sonoma County is Mimi Enright. Let me do that the other way. Jennifer Roberts and Mimi Enright. And with that said, I am going to hand this over to Mimi, and she's going to take us through tonight's fantastic presentation. Enjoy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Roberta, and thanks for positioning where we are in our four-part series. So just a reminder to folks, this is the second of 4 lectures. We hope many of you were at our first lecture last week from Eric from the Sonoma Ecology Center when he kind of did the basic framework of what sustainability is in the defensible space and beyond. And we hope we'll see you at some of our future workshops over the rest of this month. So as Roberta mentioned, my name is Mimi Enright. I'm the program coordinator for the UC Master Gardener program here in Sonoma County. And I'm going to be talking to you tonight about what we call sustainable defensible space, really recognizing the valuable ecosystem services that our landscapes provide, but also balancing that with a lens to being firewise and preparedness for future wildfire events. So for agenda tonight, and just for framing, I'll be presenting for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have 30 minutes for Q&A. Please, throughout the presentation, don't hesitate to put any questions you have in the Q&A box, and then we can use that to respond to those after I wrap up presentation component. So I'm going to touch on fire exposures, briefly touch on plants and plant spacing considerations, and then really spend the bulk of the presentation taking you through the defensible space recommendations in the 0 to 100 foot zone around structures on our properties. So hopefully you're all familiar with the fire triangle. Fire requires 3 components, and those are oxygen, heat, and fuel. And which of these 3 can you control? Of course, the only component that we can manage is the fuel component. So a step beyond the fire triangle concept, looking at fire behavior, and fire behavior is made up of fuel, weather, and topography. And again, the only component that we can have a hand in managing and controlling would be the fuel component in both fire and how fire behaves. Fuel, very basically, is anything that will burn. And in our home landscapes, that can be vegetation, it could be organic mulch, it could be fencing, roofing, decks, furniture, arbors, trellises, planter boxes, right? These are all examples of potential fuel that can feed a fire in our home landscapes that we just need to be cognizant of in terms of how we're preparing our home landscapes for future wildfire events. So there are 3 types of fire exposures that can threaten our homes and properties. And those 3 types of fire exposures are direct flame contact, which is where there's fuel that brings the flame in direct contact with our home or structures on our properties. Embers, which of course we're all too familiar with here in Sonoma County from the 2017 wildfires complex and subsequent fires. Embers, which can travel in advance of a fire front, but can ignite vegetation in immediate or fuel components in immediate proximity to a structure and transmit that fire to the structure through that channel. And then radiant heat, which is the heat exposure to a structure from, in this example, a burning tool shed in direct proximity to your home or structure. So typically, educational outreach on defensible space has focused on this direct flame contact exposure. But preparing for embers and radiant heat exposures takes a slightly different approach on our part. So as I mentioned, defensible space was really invented around helping prevent direct flame contact to our homes and structures. And defensible space implementation helps interrupt those fire pathways and reduces the potential for direct flame contact. But our preparedness for potential ember threats involves combining both home hardening with defensible space to help mitigate that ember exposure. And while we're not going to be talking about home hardening today, I'm going to be going into detail for you on defensible space implementation. There's lots of great resources out there available for you on hardening your home. And that's really the first step you should be taking if you're just starting out on your fire preparedness journey. You want to start with hardening your home and then move out into your landscape. And then our tactics for preparing for a potential radiant heat exposure involve both home hardening and fuel reduction to help reduce the potential radiant heat exposure in a wildfire event. So just want to, I think this picture from the LA Times showing a firefighter working to put out spot fires that have started from embers. I think it's really, really helps show how embers can operate during a fire event. You can see here in corners where there's some coves in the structure, how the embers are eddying within those coves. So it's just a really great way to show why it's so important for us to be implementing what is called Zone 0, that 0 to 5 foot perimeter around your home and structures to help reduce the threat of ember exposure. So let's start with some very basic principles about defensible space. Again, you want to start at the house with your home hardening and then work out from there into your landscape. On an ongoing basis, you want to remove all dead or dying plants or branches. You want to remove any ladder fuels, and I've got a few slides I'll take you through some more description of what constitutes a ladder fuel. The recommendation is to create islands or groupings of plants, and optimally, especially if you're in a higher fire severity district or if you're closer to your structure, you might want to separate those islands of plantings with non-combustible pathways in between them. You want to avoid planting or mulching close to structures. We'll go into lots more detail about that when I take you through the Zone 0 recommendations. And then maintenance is essential. You can't just plant your landscape and walk away. You need to be maintaining it, whether it's via irrigation or pruning or mulching on an ongoing basis. And we've got a great, our 4th session in this 4-part series with Jennifer Roberts is going to take you through what you need to be doing from a maintenance perspective. Okay, let's talk about some spacing. So there's 2 key principles to understand in defensible space, and those are horizontal and vertical spacing. So this slide is depicting suggested horizontal spacing guidelines for groupings of plants, and also shows how that spacing should be increased based on the degree of the slope on your property. So if you have a 20% or less slope that you're dealing with, and of course you can have different degrees of slopes in different parts of your property, right? In one part of my property right below my house, I have a 41% plus slope, but in other areas around my house, it's very flat. So you may have different degrees of slope on your property, and you need to keep in mind these spacing guidelines for these islands or groupings of plants based on that degree of slope. And of course, that increases with these steeper slopes. So if you're on a less than 20% slope, the recommendation is that you have 2 times the height of this outside shrub. So this outside shrub here and here, let's say that those shrubs are 2 feet in height, then you want to have 2 times that, or 4 feet spacing between these plant groupings or plant islands. And again, that increases with the increased steepness of your slope. So again, the horizontal spacing concept here showing you with the visual, very gratefully drafted up by our colleague Ellie Inslee, showing tree spacing. These are fire professional recommendations that based on a less steep slope of 20% or less, you want to look at having 10 feet of separation between the canopies of your trees. And again, as that steepness of those slopes increases, you want to increase the spacing of your trees. Now moving to the concept of vertical spacing. You want to have at least 6 feet of clearance from your ground plane to the lowest branches on your trees. If you have any shrubs or ground covers under your trees, you want to have 3 times the height of that shrub or ground cover to the lowest tree limbs. So let's say you've got a ground cover under your trees that's 1 foot in height. Well, you're still going to want your 6 feet spacing. Let's give you a better example. Let's say you have a small shrub that's 3 feet in height below your tree. Then you want to have 3 times the height of that shrub, or 9 feet from the top of that shrub to your lowest tree limb. And then this visual on the far right is showing you the concept of ladder fuels, right? So you want to prevent the fire from moving from the ground plane up into the canopy of the tree. And that's why you want to have that plant spacing to remove and reduce the risk of that fire laddering up into the tree canopy. So plant placement is really incredibly important. Often people ask for a fire-resistant plant list, and really any plant can burn, and we feel like can be misleading for people thinking they've picked plants that are fire-resistant and they're all set, when in fact, all fire-safe landscaping requires ongoing maintenance, and you really want to make sure you're placing it properly. You don't want to put a shrub that's going to get 6 feet in height without awareness of the plant spacing that's going around it. So you really need to pay attention to the characteristics and the size of the plant, where you're placing it, and then how you're maintaining it on an ongoing basis. Okay, so let's dive into the 3 defensible space zones. So again, can't reinforce enough that it's really important to note that you want to start with your home and your house hardening, and then move out from there through your 3 defensible space zones. So the first zone is called Zone 0, which is 0 to 5 feet around the perimeter of your structures, and also includes 6-inch vertical clearance up around the base or foundation around your home. Zone 1 is the intermediate zone, or the 5 to 30 foot zone around the perimeter of your structures. And then Zone 2, the extended zone, is 30 to 100 feet around your structures. Okay, so let's dive into Zone 0 first. So this is really a relatively newer zone introduced into defensible space recommendations due to that ember exposure that I had showed you in that visual earlier in the presentation. So this zone is also known as the Ember Defense Zone. I want to stress that this zone is supported by scientific research, and the whole intent is to reduce the likelihood of structure ignition by reducing the potential for direct ignition from embers in immediate proximity to your structure. So it's really a critical component of structure defense, and when coupled with zones 1 and 2 is really essential to your defensible space preparedness. So there is new state of California legislation coming out that's going to be mandating implementation of Zone 0. The specific recommendations aren't finalized yet, so we'll hopefully have new information for you, I'm suspecting in early 2026, about what will and won't be allowed in Zone 0 from the state legislation. But it should be very much in alignment with the recommendations that we're making for you today, but may allow a little leeway. Maybe you can have a terracotta pot with a perennial non-woody plant that's 3 feet in height or less, that's on wheels that you can move out during a wildfire. So I don't really expect that we'll have significant change from what we're recommending. And certainly if you're in a higher fire severity zone, you really want to be fully implementing your Zone 0 and these recommendations. So optimally, you want to eliminate any plants or flammable materials in Zone 0. This is 0 to 5 foot zone around your structures. Or very minimally, you want to minimize your plants. And if you're minimizing your plants, you're taking plants away from under windows or in those corners. If you remember that embers visual that showed how the embers were eddying in that corner. So at a bare minimum, you want to remove any plants under windows or in corners. And again, optimally eliminate and remove any flammable materials in this zone. If you must have plants in this zone, then the recommendation is to use low perennial or succulent plants. But again, with the new legislation, I'm not 100% sure that whether or not that's going to be allowed or not. So optimally, you're going to choose to eliminate any plants in this zone. A lot of folks struggle, aesthetically. That's really a big change from how we've traditionally landscaped our homes with foundation plants up against our structure. There's lots of great visuals that certainly my colleague April's going to be sharing in the presentation next week to show you how you can do this and still have a really beautiful garden in your defensible space zone around your home. So you want to use only inorganic and non-combustible mulches. So no wood mulches in Zone 0. There's lots of opportunities with gravel and stone to create something that's still really beautiful and functional in this zone. Again, from a maintenance perspective, you want to be really vigilant about your maintenance in Zone 0, especially during fire season. For sure, if there's a red flag warning, you want to be cleaning up clutter and leaf debris on a regular basis. And we want to stress that trees are okay in Zone 0. We're not saying if you have a tree that's encroaching into your Zone 0 that you have to remove it, but that you do need to keep a clearance of at least 5 feet from the rooftop, and then keep any tree limbs at least 10 feet from chimneys. And that is a Sonoma County code requirement. Okay, let's move on to zone 1. And zone 1 is the 5 to 30-foot perimeter around your home and structures. And the purpose of zone 1 is to reduce the likelihood of fire burning directly to the structure. But it's also important to note that this zone provides a defendable zone for fire personnel to stage and take action. If you're lucky enough to have firefighters defending your home during a wildfire event, this is likely where they're going to be staging to mount their defense. So again, the recommendation is that you want to plant in islands or groupings of plantings that are separated by pathways to break up the path of the fire, right? To break up the flow of fire towards your home or structure. Ideally, you want to focus on small shrubs or perennials of 3 feet in height or less. You can have some larger specimen shrubs or trees if they're well placed and maintained. Maybe you have one larger specimen shrub or one tree, but again, you want to be particularly vigilant if you're in a higher fire severity zone. If you are keeping these larger specimen shrubs or trees in the zone, you just want to be really vigilant about your maintenance, making sure that your trees are well pruned and any ladder fuels are avoided. Let's move on to zone 2, and that's the 30 to 100-foot perimeter around your home and structures. Your actions in zone 2 are designed to reduce the potential behavior of an oncoming fire in such a way to drop an approaching fire from the crown of the trees down to the ground level. So it's pretty much the same recommendations as zone 1. You want to continue focus on creating islands of plant groupings, watching your horizontal and your vertical spacing. You can include some larger plants and groupings. Those are becoming more appropriate in your 30 to 100-foot zone around your house. And then you want to make sure you're mowing any annual grasses to 4 inches or in height or less during fire season. And that is a Sonoma County code requirement. You want to be very careful about not having a wooden fence or gate attached to your home. That's just a direct line or pathway for fire to move to ignite your home or structure. This picture shows from the insurance business home and safety, shows some wood mulch at the base of this wooden fence that caught fire from embers. You can see the wooden fence was ignited, but it's this metal gate and this gravel in the 0 to 5-foot zone that help prevent the fire from spreading to the building. And that also applies to hedges. So you don't want anything that's a continuous organic pathway for fire to move to your home or structure. So mulch is an important aspect of of a sustainable home landscape. It helps with weed suppression and water conservation, but it's also organic, so it can burn. The current recommendation is for larger size composted arbor mulch. But for sure you don't want, this picture is kind of a what not to do in this scenario. This is gorilla hair or shredded bark mulch. The tendency can be if embers land in this shredded type of mulch material, they can smolder, and if firefighters have been defending your home and they move on, the smoldering can reignite in that bark mulch and restart the fire. So you don't want to use mulch in a widespread manner. And certainly this is likely unirrigated, older, unmaintained shrubs. And with this combination of, not well maintained and likely not irrigated woody plants directly next to this widespread shredded bark mulch. And of course we see here, there's a wooden fence and gate attached to the home. Those are definitely practices that you would want to be moving away from. And again, very important in your 0 to 5-foot zone around your home that you're using inorganic mulches such as gravel or concrete. Okay, again, ongoing maintenance is essential. You want to be removing any dead or dying branches from trees and shrubs on an ongoing basis. You want to mow any annual grasses or weeds to 4 inches in height. Prune out any dead material from the interior of shrubs. In Jen's maintenance session in 2 weeks, she'll take you through, what a lot of common shearing techniques for maintaining shrubs can do in terms of helping build up dead debris and branches and material on the interior of shrubs. So you want to stay away from that type of practice and be cleaning out any dead material from the interior of your shrubs. Again, remove any ladder fuels, and on a regular basis, look at thinning and reducing your tree canopies. It's really important to make sure that you and your family have clear access in and out of the property if you need to evacuate, and that firefighters have clear access in if they're coming to defend your home. It's important to maintain the vegetation around your access to your property. The recommendation for vegetation management is 10 feet from the road edge and 15 feet vertically. And then to maintain 12 feet of unobstructed pavement for the passage of vehicles. In this case, you'd want to, of course, be mowing these annual or weedy grasses and limbing up your trees to ensure unobstructed passage through for firefighters and for your evacuation. So just to wrap up, again, in zone 0, which is that 0 to 5 foot perimeter around your home and structures, you want no organic materials if possible. Use only inorganic materials such as gravel or stepping stones. In zone 1, that 5 to 30 foot perimeter around your home and structures, you want to plant in islands with materials such as low herbaceous or non-woody perennials, grasses or succulents, and specimen or individual shrubs or trees. And then in zone 2, that 30 to 100 foot zone around your home and structures, the same basic principles as zone 1, but you can include more shrub and tree groupings in widely spaced groups separated by areas that help break up flow of wildfire. And that is it for my presentation. And I hope I'm doing okay on time. And we wanted to open it up to questions, and our colleague Jen Roberts is going to lead the Q&A for us.
All right. Thank you, Mimi. Great job.
Thanks.
Okay, so we have one question so far in the Q&A box, and this person asks, pertaining to the 0 to 100 foot rule of clearance of fuel, my neighbor has a lot of weeds behind us, but claims he only has to clear it 100 feet from his own property, but it doesn't apply to the neighbor's property. So as a result, my home and other neighbors' homes are exposed to his weeds and debris, but his home is safe. Why is that okay?
Well, I can say personally, my zone 2, my 30 to 100 foot zone on one side of my home is on a neighbor's property. And it was driving me nuts when he hadn't done, the weed clearance and cut back the weeds to 4 inches or height or less until like June. So it's this neighbor cooperation is really incredibly important. And maybe Roberta can speak to, there's so much amazing work going on around the county with fire safe councils and COPE groups and groups that are trying to create better awareness in neighborhood groups to help, because we need to be helping each other with our fire preparedness. So Roberta, I'm sure you have more to share on that as well.
I do, actually. I can totally empathize with the individual who wrote that question and all of those that also empathize with that question. And a little bit about me, for those that don't know, I was a firefighter, then a fire inspector, and I finished my career in the fire service, sort of, as the county fire marshal for the county of Sonoma, and I currently, as mentioned earlier, chair of Fire Safe Sonoma. So I'm also a state certified fire marshal, so I have that credential. So with that said, as part of my ethos, if you will, I fought that fight before, and to me, it depends on how the code official interprets the language of the law and how he or she applies it in each case. So the scenario you described, I ran into, and I actually crafted a legal theory and argument that says that you have to have 100 feet around structures. The code isn't specific about who owns the home. And so in my mind, you also have to have 100 feet around your neighbor's home, the way I interpret the code. Uh, so it's pretty clear that if I have, 30 feet between myself and the next house, I have to maintain my 100 foot, and they have to maintain their 100 foot. Let me take that a different way. If I have more than 100 feet uh, between my house and the property line, and my neighbor's house is, you know, say right on the property line, I should not be allowed to have vegetation that is not legal within their 100 foot zone. Hopefully that'll make sense to y'all. And I actually was almost going to go to court on this, but the defendant settled in the case that I was bringing with that argument. So again, uh, it depends on who's enforcing the code, how they're interpreting it, but that's how I interpreted it when I was the county fire marshal.
All right.
So I don't think that's an actual answer for this particular scenario or this individual, but that's my experience. Take from it what you will.
And there are really a lot of amazing fire safe councils and code groups. More and more springing up in Sonoma County, so always an opportunity to think about maybe starting a Firewise group in your own community or neighborhood to try to help, elevate everybody's awareness of the topics and issues. It's the working with neighbors issues can be challenging for sure.
And if you're going to do that, reach out to us because Fire Safe Sonoma is the designated Firewise regional coordinator for Sonoma County. So if you're interested in Firewise, please reach out to us or our team.
And Roberta, I wonder if you could talk about the chipper program as well, so people could get their neighbors together and use the chipper program in your trailer.
I could talk about, there's a couple of things that I think are in that comment or question or ask. So the County of Sonoma does have a countywide chipper program where if you're an unincorporated county, you can request to have materials chipped that you put out along the edge of your road or along your curb if you have a curb. So the criteria is you trim up your stuff, drag it out to the curb with the business end pointing toward the street so it's easy to load into the hopper of the chipper. And then you request that the Sonoma County Chippers crews come out and grind that all up for you. I think the other thing you were mentioning, April, has to do with a project we just launched where we received funding from the county for organized communities. If you're a a local fire safe council or a Firewise community or an organized group of some form that wants to be a Firewise community, that still works for me. And you want to do what I call a weekend work party, you can reserve our tool trailer. That's a tandem axle, 16-foot box trailer with, I think we have 5 weed eaters in there now, a bunch of loppers, a couple pole saws and things like that, gloves, helmets, ear protection, etc., to do defensible space work. You can schedule to borrow that resource from us. We'll deliver it and pick it up when you're finished. And then married to the weekend work party project, if you're in unincorporated Sonoma County, we can also provide you with a 20 cubic yard bin from Recology to put things in it that won't go in the chipper or just general debris. And then if you do have chipper piles following that work party weekend, those just get piled up along your curb. And then the third part of that trifecta project would be that we would help schedule the Sonoma County chipper crews to come out the following week and chip up all the stuff that you put out at the curb. So that project is totally free to anybody who wants to use those resources. And we have the ability to deliver 15 of those. We've delivered 2 so far, and the project will end June 30th of next year.
I just think it's like a great way to like bring a cake next door, you know, and try to work with your neighbor and have these resources available. Jen and I spoke at the Ross Fireways community, and it was just like this wonderful way to like not blame your neighbor, but try to like bring these resources and try to help, because it's expensive to do this work.
It's a lot of fun to get together with the community, and in some cases we help them. We did one for the Wiki Up Hills Fire Safe Council, brand new Fire Safe Council. It was their first community project. And we spent, it's funny, we calendared, they did not opt to do the chipper piece of that project, but they did do the bin. And we imagined we would work, you know, from 9 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. By lunch break, we had that bin filled, overflowing. So we had more than 20 yards in there. One of the guys were on top of it, jumping on it to make it go down so he could put more stuff in it. But it was a really fun time.
All right. Okay, so John is asking, a portion of my parcel is steep and further than it's outside the 100-foot zone from the house, and he's very concerned about eliminating trees that could cause slope instability. The steep slope is above my house and a slide could impact my house. Does the spacing apply to 100+ feet or beyond, we say?
Want me to take that one? I can
Sure.
start. Okay, it depends on where that slope is in relation to your house. So if the slope is downslope from your house, that can be a problem because the fire usually goes upslope. And I would also be reluctant to take out trees. If you do remove any substantial chunks of trees, do not take out the root ball because it will cause problems and will result in erosion. So, you know, beyond, yeah, that's a tough one. You know, you just have to try to do what you can and bear as much risk as you're able to, and still, you know, do as much as you possibly can. But
Yeah,
definitely limb those up, limb them up.
yeah, April's put in a great resource, Tending the Land, which Sonoma Ecology Center, our colleagues, Sonoma Ecology Center put together, which is the beyond 100-foot defensible space zone. You definitely have to be careful about erosion and removing trees first because of the slope instability issue. John, you're absolutely right. One of our colleagues, former fire official, it really resonated with me. She said you should be able to ride if you're looking at your beyond 100 feet, you should be able to ride a horse through it cleanly. You don't need to wholesale clear trees, but you want to definitely be removing any, dead underbrush and limbing up trees, as Roberta talked about. But you're absolutely right. You don't want to be eliminating a lot of trees because of the slope instability issue. It looks like Ellie has more thoughts to add to that as well.
Well, yeah, you guys pretty much covered everything that I would have said, and I definitely would look at tendingtheland.org. I did notice that he said it was upslope of him, and typically looking upslope is you're much better off with the vegetation upslope than downslope, as Roberta said, and definitely managing the vegetation so you don't have ladder fuels in case you have somebody above you uphill, so that they've got the downslope problem. And you can, I guess one of the things and you're talking about a forest, if it's a chaparral slope, what they've shown in Southern California is it's not that important to do the clearing beyond the 100 feet, but you want to, and if you do any clearing, then you want to leave at least 70 to 80% of the vegetation. So if you can remove some of the vegetation, if it's non-forest, if it's chaparral, and then keep some of the spacing, increase the spacing by removing 20 to 25% of the vegetation, then you're leaving habitat and stabilizing the slope. So yeah, I guess that's about all. This is a great question. I love the way you put all that detail in.
Yep.
All right, we'll stick with the slope theme. Sari is asking, I have a steep grassy hill right behind my house. What inorganic approach do you recommend?
Well, for sure, I would implement the 0 to 5 with an inorganic solution, maybe gravel or some other type of solution. And then if it's not landscaped, then you want to be managing weed eating it, right, to the 4 inches. If it's just weeds, annual weeds, you want to be weed eating that to 4 inches and height or less during fire season. I don't know, what, does anybody else have thoughts about when she's talking about inorganic approach? In terms of other thoughts beyond that? Or Roberta?
Yeah, I would just say keep the grass cut to 3 or 4 inches in height,
Yep.
particularly in the warmer seasons,
Yep.
definitely. And then, you know, as you get closer to your house, be a little bit more, you know, stringent in terms of it. Definitely, as Mimi mentioned, the 0 to 5 is going to be critical.
Yep.
But yeah, erosion is always something to consider. And I'm glad you guys are thinking about that and not just ripping this stuff out.
Yeah,
Ellie, you want to add?
Sure. So, you know, if you want to have if you want to do some habitat, then come to our presentation on next Tuesday when April will be talking about how to landscape your garden, because, well, sure, you can leave the weedy area, but you can also do really wonderful stuff that improves habitat for wildlife and is beautiful. So if you're game, then there's always that option to add some plants in islands with divide with, as Mimi had said. So I won't go back over that. Thanks.
All right. Will the new regulations for Zone 0 be for new home builds, everyone, or homeowners in certain fire severity zones?
Roberta, you want to go or you want me to start?
I'll take a crack if you don't mind, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong or fill in. the- So as I'm interpreting the relatively current drafting of the legislation that will likely go into effect January 1st of 2026, the requirements will be for new homes constructed in the high or very high fire severity zone. Existing homes will have 3 years before they will be mandated into compliance. So at that, let's see, 26, 27, 28, 29, probably 2030, you'll probably start to see the regulations being pushed upon the existing homeowners in high or very high fire severity zones. And then even at that point, as I interpret the draft regulations, even then, if you have a particularly challenging issue to remedy, you can fuss with it for 3 years before you're really, you know, pushed into the corner. So if you've got like, you know, 2 big trees right there at 3 feet away from your house, and it's going to cost you, you know, $10,000 to remove them, and it's economically challenging, you're likely to be able to be let to have the 3 years after that to make yourself in compliance. But I just want to make sure y'all know this is for high and very high fire severity zones is where this regulation is likely to apply once it's enacted. So if you're not there, don't worry about. But also please remember that regardless of the regulations, a lot of times the insurance companies driving the bus.
Nothing to add to that.
And someone asked, how do you find out what your fire severity zone is? And we have put that in the chat.
Perfect.
Thank
Really
you,
important to know and to look up. And to know your evacuation zone.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. Someone's asking, can we lobby to change the law for the 100-foot clearance so that it's clear and neighbors do not have to fight about it? Is that comment
Ooh.
period done?
any citizen of California can, propose new legislation. It doesn't even cost any money. It just takes a very long time. And then to do that, of course, you have to get, depending on what you're trying to do, you have to get initial set of signatures before it'll be even considered to go on the ballot. So it is work, but it's not impossible. Another way is to find a state legislator who would be interested in authoring a bill and carrying it forward. So it can be done. It just takes work.
So it looks like there's a problem with the link for finding your fire severity zone, but I'm sure April is working on it for you.
All right.
Yeah, I'm looking for that right now.
Great, thanks, guys.
Kirsten is wondering what decking materials are approved for zone 0, 1, and 2.
Oh, good. I was just on that. I was like obsessed with that one. So sorry, I wasn't managing the chat well.
Oh,
You want to grab that deck one?
want to go, April?
No, I don't know that much about it, but I was putting in the Batu that Ellie used at her house, and you just want a Class A fire rated decking. And there's a lot of resources online, and Roberta probably has more information about that.
Yeah, so the zone 0 does not happen on top of your deck. The zone 0 begins at the edge of your deck. And so if you're talking about the zone 0 specifically, that's where the regulation would apply. However, if you have a wood deck and don't have a lot of money to spend, my recommend is, assuming most decks are standard 2x6, planks on top of joists, my recommend is that you remove 3 or 4 of those 2x6 wood planks closest to your house and replace them with either fire treated 2x6 wood planks that can actually be purchased locally. There's a site in Katati that actually has them. In others, you can look for them, or you can even replace them with aluminum 2x6 deck planks, if you don't mind that. But in either case, it'll give you that extra protection for that area that is insidious and very likely will result in what we call areas where what's it called? Where you'll end up with a receptive fuel bed, where leaves and things like that will pile up. Even on a windy night when you've evacuated and the fire is coming, that wind is going to bring with it a lot of duff and debris and will land in those little nooks and crannies and corners around your house. So that is a way to help keep any embers from getting a good start at that intersection of your deck in your house, which is really vulnerable.
So if I could just say, and Roberta has helped me a lot with this, there's not a requirement to have a Class A deck, although, and there are, as April has put in, there are materials and they tend to be more expensive, but all decks materials are expensive. But you could have a redwood deck and that would be okay, doing what Roberta is saying. She also, when I was putting in my deck, because the joists are, things can get in, you can actually get aluminum tape. And I don't think you mentioned this, Roberta, and actually put tape on the space where you're going to have the gap in your deck, so that if an ember falls down and lands on a joist that's maybe pressure treated, then less chance for that to actually ignite.
Yes, brilliant call. Thank you for calling that out. Yeah, you can buy a 2-inch wide roll of aluminum tape. You'll find it in your hardware stores in the heating and cooling section, because it's normally used to tape metal duct work for heating and ventilation systems. You get a roll of that, and before you put your planks on top of your joist, you roll that tape out on the top of your joist, and it, like Ellie said, it creates a barrier for those embers, so it doesn't get seated in that little nook and cranny and start your joist on fire. Good call, Ellie. Thank you.
No, you first. You're the one who said it in the first place.
And where can we get aluminum planks?
You might have to shop around. I honestly don't know where locally. I suspect Friedman Brothers may have them. Some of your higher end hardware stores would probably have them or can order them for you for sure. But I looked into it because this question came up before and I wanted to research it. And I did discover that one can purchase, you know, nominal 2x6 aluminum planks. I think they're commonly used like in aluminum bleacher construction and things like that. Maybe an outfit that does that kind of work might be able to give you a line on those.
Great. Okay, and people are asking if we can give all these links that we're sharing tonight in an email, and we will. At the end of each week, we're sending out an email with the recording and the presentation slides. And then at the end of all 4 presentations, we can definitely get all the links out, if not sooner. Okay. Kathleen is saying many areas in Sonoma County are urban or more densely populated and don't have 30 feet between your neighbors. Many cases, it's 5 feet. Thoughts about this? So what's this going to look like?
0 to 5.
Well, in that case, it's more likely house-to-house ignition that's going to be the threat to your home with that type proximity. I don't know if Roberta, if you have more specific thoughts to share.
Yeah, just try to keep that space clean because, you know, here's the thing to keep in mind. And I kind of landed on this philosophy from somebody else in a presentation that I learned from somebody else while I was doing a presentation. So when we talk about red flag warnings symbolize a period in time where if a fire should occur, it is going to overwhelm the resources we have available to attack that fire in minutes. And so keep that in mind when you hear that there's a red flag warning. Just know that if there is a fire, you're not going to have a lot of resources to deal with whatever does start. There won't be enough, in other words. So if we get a house on fire during a red flag period, and there's stuff between that house and the next house and the next house and the next house, etc., then one fire on a house could easily become a whole neighborhood conflagration during a windy red flag period. So anything that you can do to keep that space void of things that would increase the likelihood of a house-to-house ignition is helpful. Use your imagination. It's not, I don't think it's that hard to do that. You just have to remember, don't park your RV there. You know, don't build a shed there and fill it full of firewood. You know, stuff like that. Don't put
Place a wood gate with a metal gate.
yeah, and fences at the first of the year with the new regs, houses in the high and very high fire severity zone will be required to have 5 feet of non-combustible fence attached to their home. If they have a fence attached to their home, the first 5 feet next to the house will have to be non-combustible.
Ellie?
Keep raising my hand, yes. I wanted to mention that in some of the local responsibility areas, and you may want to comment on this also, Roberta, the local fire agencies will have some flexibility to make decisions about what happens. And so there's the state responsibility areas, which are usually unincorporated, and then the local responsibility areas, which are managed by the local fire stations. And so, you know, so it's not, there may be some flexibility in your neighborhood. And I wanted to mention one of the questions asked whether Oakmont was in the high fire hazard severity zone. And if you look at the map that we put in the chat about fire hazard severity zones, Oakmont is divided into, has 3 different zones: high, very high, and moderate. And they're all really close together. So if there were some house-to-house fires, like in the high fire hazard or the very high, they could easily affect what's going on in the moderate hazard severity zone because they're all so close together. And so I think it's wise to, even though you may be in a moderate zone, to still, even though it's not required, it's a very good idea to practice some of these recommendations.
I
And
want to rebut that a little bit, Ellie.
yes, please.
And I'm not sure if you articulated it the way the way I'm interpreting it, but just to be clear. So, with regard to the new regulation, Zone 0, well, let me back up. With any regulation, there's a hierarchy. So there's federal law that tells the states what to do. The states are many of them, if not most of them, hopefully all of them, so have a certain amount of state sovereignty. We won't argue that at this particular moment in time, please. And so regardless, so then below the hierarchy of the federal law, there's the state constitution and state regulations. Okay, the state regulations cannot be less restrictive than the federal regulations. And then below the state regulations, you have county constitutions and county regulations. And so the county regulations, except in local regulations like city and municipalities, those entities can have their own local ordinances, but except in very rare cases, they have to be at least as restrictive as the law above them. So local ordinance cannot be, in most cases, less restrictive than state regulation. Just can't happen. Again, except in very rare cases where it's specifically spelled out in the legislation. So County of Sonoma, for example, if the state building code says that, you have to have 5 feet between buildings, the county ordinance cannot say, that's fine, we're going to allow 3 feet. Can't do that. You can say, oh, we're going to require people to have 10 feet to property line. They could do that, but not the other way around.
Okay. Chris has a quick question about the requirements for the chipper program. Can the chipper piles be next to a gravel road edge, or does it have to be a paved public road?
Yeah, as long as the chipper machine can get there easily. That's kind of the thing. I mean, if you can, drive your horse trailer there and get it around and back it up and in it, relatively easily without a lot of difficulty, then the chipper machine should be able to do that. With the county's chipper program, I think they usually ask people when they submit their request to send a couple photos of where they think the chipper piles might be or where they are if you already have them piled, so that they can make sure the crews can actually get to it. But it does not have to be a paved road.
Okay. How effective is a ring of strong sprinklers that run daily around the periphery of a house during fire season?
How much you want to pay for water?
Yeah, so I mean, water is a limited resource. There's no guarantees that we won't be in a drought. There's no guarantees. I mean, you could have it highly hydrated, but if it's high winds, extremely high heat, it could, evaporate all that value very quickly. I think that the better strategy is to follow the practices outlined. You want to have a well irrigated and healthy landscape. That's like a really important defense. But just like running sprinklers every day to try to keep a landscape wetted in defense of a possible fire, I'm not sure is a sustainable strategy. I don't know if others have thoughts to weigh in on that. April, Ellie's just shaking her head no.
I think there like it's more information to be obtained. I think there's a lot of companies out there with these crazy sprinklers, and I think the firefighters don't like them because they drain the water system in a fire. So I think you have to be really careful.
Yeah, if the fuel moisture is high, if it's well irrigated vegetation, that's the ideal. But if you're just putting water on top of your plants and ground, as soon as any heat gets there, like Mimi was alluding to, that's going to evaporate so fast, unbelievably fast. I'll give you an example. If you see sometimes in the news media footage, or maybe you've seen it in person, you'll see like a big building on fire and you see the firefighters from a distance, you know, lobbing water into that fire. If you look closely, if they're just lobbing water on top of that fire, it's not a proper application of the fire, of the hose line, because that water is evaporating before it even gets to the base of the fire. Water just goes so fast, you know, with heat. You know, 212 degrees to turn into steam. That's all. 212 degrees Fahrenheit, and the water's gone.
Great analogy. Well, on that note, thank you all for joining us tonight. We hope you'll join us next week. April Owens will be talking about, you know, applying from a design lens these principles that we talked about tonight in the 3 defensible space zones. And then in 2 more weeks, Jen is going to talk to us about maintenance. So we hope we'll see you at those 2 future events.
All
Thanks,
right.
Everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Hopefully see you
Bye.
next week.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ricardo, for doing the interpretation. Thank you,
Thank
Sonoma
you,
County.
Roberto.
Thanks, Ricardo.
Yeah, thank you all. That was great.
Thank you, anonymous donors in Sonoma County, for the funding.
Love those anonymous donors. Bye, everybody.